name is Jasmine, and I am your small town Grey Witch, here to talk to you about tarot. So the tarot cards have been known pretty much forever, and pretty much almost every witch uses some sort of tarot or oracle deck. Now, I do have a video that discusses the difference between tarot and oracle decks, but this series is going to be more focused on the tarot concept because we didn't start off with tarot. Alright? So just so you're aware, I am qualified to teach on this. This is my first time teaching, though. However, I have done countless, and I mean countless, classes on tarot. I have gone to groups and worked with the different meanings of the cards. I have gone to classes. I have literally, this is my certificate of 150 professional hours taking classes on tarot, or at least this class, and that's only one of them. So I am decently well versed. Not a professional by any means, but decently well versed on tarot. I have also done public readings for people. It was for charity. Oddly enough, that was part of my trying to give back program, but I have done readings for people and done events. So this is the first time I've actually taught about it, so I might be a little stumbly, but I am well versed. All right, so this segment is going to be about the history of the cards. So tarot didn't start off as tarot. It started off as playing cards. So what you see now is, actually I have to get my little card deck open. So it started off with literally like your kings, your queens, your aces. It actually, kings and queens weren't really added at first. So it was your ace through 10 cards. Jokers were added later. And your kings, queens, and aces were added later. So it's your ace through 10 playing cards. And that's how this started off. However, they didn't start off as your hearts, your spades, your what you expected. They actually started off with the tarot suits of pentacles, staffs, more than wands, but staffs, swords, and cups. And it started off in China, believe it or not. So you had your playing cards. And they weren't divination cards. They were playing cards. Alright? So that's how they started off. It was in China. And then China's playing cards moved in through Islam and some of the other Muslim, Egypt, all those other countries, and slowly swept through. And then in Italy, you get the first actual tarot deck. Alright? So they were just for playing. They weren't for divination at all. Alright? Who doesn't like playing with cards? I know, right? So in Italy, you actually get your first tarot card. Pretty much in the 15th century. And yes, I have notes because it's a lot. So in the 15th century in Italy, you get the actual tarot cards. The fortune-telling cards. Alright? So the minor arcana was created through people. Pictures of the actual things. You got like ace and stuff like that. And your tens and so on and so forth. And then in Italy, they added the page, the knight, and the king. They didn't add the queen until later. And that was kind of they did add those in through the from China to Italy. So Italy, they in the Islamic and Muslim kind of regions, they did have those, but they didn't believe to have them. It's actually believed that those weren't added until, it's a little bit of debate, until they reached Italy, because Muslims don't believe in putting faces on things. Like, they don't want to depict people or places or so on and so forth. Sorry, not places, people. Because it's part of their religious belief. They don't want to depict people. So you wouldn't get a card of like a queen with a face on it. Or a king with a face on it. Because that would be kind of like blasphemy for their religion. So they didn't depict people. Alright? So that's why it is believed that they didn't have those face cards. The queens were added later. It is believed that the queens were added later due to the queens in the European countries because of the queen's role in the monarchy. But the queens weren't added until later. It was just the page, the knight, and the kings. Queens took a back role. We tend to come later in the importance, which, yay, feminism, we get importance now. But yeah, so the king wanting the queen as a help ruler, the importance of the queen, and so on and so forth is what is believed to add the queens. Alright. So, I'm going to give you a bunch of dates. They may not be in numerical order, so that's just the way that they kind of go over by importance, not by this. So, in 1480, the suits of the playing cards were changed from coins, cups, swords, and staffs to your spades, your spades, your hearts, your diamonds, and your clovers. So that was actually changed in 1480. So that is not what they started off as. Alright. The picture card packs. So, in other words, the themed packs where you actually saw like people in all of them, not just like this. It would actually have a person on here. Like, if you've ever gone to a comic store, you can see the different pictures. Like, I have a deck here that is my Conjure cards. That is technically a deck. And they have pictures on them. Picture cards. Was actually done between 1418 and 1425. And the first deck was by Martiano de Torana. I'm going to butcher names, excuse me. And it was depicted of Greek gods and birds. So the pip cards, or the minor arcana, or the 1 through 10s, were birds. And then the page, knight, queen, and king was actually Greek gods. So that is kind of interesting. So in the original game, they didn't have the trumps or the major arcana, the triumphs. They were known as triumphs, then trumps, then major arcana. Those weren't added, but they were added in a German game in 1420. So that's when you start seeing actual like triumph cards or trump cards. So a lot of it is happening, if you notice, between the 1410s and the 1430s. Like, that is where this card game really took off. Alright? Tarot showed up, the actual tarot decks, the divination decks, not just the playing cards, the divination decks showed up between 1430 and 1450. So card games took off between 1410 and 1430. Then you get into the tarot decks in 1430 to 1450. So you see that, and you see it kind of take off because of a massive invention. So before the tarot, they were, and we see this kind of thing, it's because you see these cards, these were printed. So before this time, before the 1430s to the 1450s, they were all hand painted. They were all made personally. They were not printed. They could not be duplicated very easily. So it was very elite. This still is a very elite kind of card game through this time. And they were freaking expensive. They were bloody expensive. So, in Italy, the printing press, which is pretty much that stamp press, wasn't like a printer that we see today. It was more like a wood stamp press, emerged, and we see more tarot cards and playing cards, but especially the divination concepts of it coming out in Milan, Ferrara, and Bologna, or Blogna, of Italy. So that's why Italy is actually known for the first tarot decks, because before that it was just playing cards. So gambling, yada yada yada. All right? So, in then we go almost like another 90 years, so almost 100 years, all right? And in 1540, the fortune-telling book by Francisco Marcoloni, Marcelloni in Venice was actually printed. That was the first book that was printed that actually described each meaning to the cards. So it would tell you what the Eight of Diamonds meant. If you pulled a Three of Hearts, it would tell you what it meant. So, again, fortune telling was still with regular player cards. We don't get the tarot that we know today until later on. But that was a staple because it helped people have actual meanings for each cards versus just word of mouth. They could look to a book if they forgot. It wasn't because before you would have to learn from somebody else and remember all of it. Now you could look to the book. And that's why Italy gets its reverence for being fortune telling cards, because books were coming out and they started being fortune telling cards in Italy. All right? So, then we're going to jump a bajillion years. Not a bajillion, but like 200 years. 250 years. In 1780, the trumps were double-headed to actual pictures. So instead of the trumps, so your major arcana, being just double-headed playing cards, like you see normal decks, you'd have the two heads of the queen and then the queen going this way. You actually see actual pictures on them. So, for instance, instead of having your normal playing card, you would have actual pictures on the cards. And why was this a huge thing? It's because it helped with memory. So you didn't have to have a you still had to have a good memory. But it wasn't super hard because you could rely a little bit more on the pictures when fortune telling for others or yourself. You didn't constantly have to flip through that book. It made you look a little more professional. It helped with memory. And a lot of people couldn't always afford the book. They could afford the cards or the book, but it took money. These things were expensive. Like, they were not cheap. This was for the elite class. This was something that was higher up there. So therefore, these things were expensive. So if someone else could get their hands on a deck, they might not be able to afford the book, or so on and so forth. So the pictures helped. Plus, it gave each deck its own kind of unique. Obviously, it led to decks being printed that we see nowadays, where it's a bunch of different pictures and so on and so forth. So, now, we did get what each card meant earlier, but it wasn't as extensive. And it didn't include the trump cards. It was for your natural playing cards. Okay? But in 1770, now this guy is like known very well because he's not just like some guy. Jean Baptiste Alette. Aletta. Also known as Atella. That was his nickname. I know these weird French names. Come on. Published divinatory meanings for the cards of the Piquet deck. Using the Piquet deck. Now, why is this important? Because we already had a book that kind of told us the different things. But remember, those things were like literally like when it was published, it was literally like the 4 of spades means this. Now, that's hard to remember. It wasn't a part of the trumps or the major arcana, wasn't in that. It was literally just for a deck of playing cards. So, why was this important? Because it gave divination meanings to the 32 playing cards. But it also had one non-traditional card in the Piquet deck. So it gave way for more books to be published on the different meanings of the tarot. And again, we weren't using the tarot. We were using something like this. We did have the trumps at this point, but that's not what a lot of people used. So there was trumps going out, but there were so many decks. Just like there are now, there's a bajillion decks you could get. There are a bajillion decks back then too. Because this wasn't like it is today where it's just printing and printing and printing and printing and printing. But there was a selection of decks. So the Piquet deck was the 32 standard cards. But then it was also one non-traditional card. And he wrote the book for that deck. And what each card meant and how to read them. And again, this was when they stopped looking as much like this and more like this, where they had the pictures and stuff for the trumps, but not in the Piquet deck. Alright? The trumps were not in the Piquet deck. Alright. So, now, let me get to my things, because I got lots of notes, lots of decks, lots of things going on. Alright? So, after that, we had another special guy. In 1781, so this is nearly, again, only like one-ish year after the trumps were double-headed, but it was a good 11 years after Jean created his actual like book that explained each card. Alright, so in 1781, Anton Court de Gobelin, a Swiss clergyman, published Le Monde Primitif, a study that included religious symbolism and its survival of the modern world. So, what does that mean? It asserted the tarot symbolism represented in both the mysteries of Isis and Thoth. Now, Thoth is a god. He is not the Thoth deck. That was way after Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley was like 19th century, like not even thought of. So when I'm talking about Thoth right now, I'm talking about the actual god. So he compared the tarot meanings with Isis and Thoth, the gods. Alright? He also said that the word tarot came from the Egyptian words tar and ro, meaning royal road. Okay? and therefore the tarot represented the royal road to wisdom. Later, Egyptianists found nothing that the Egyptian language to support the gremlins. So, in other words, he was like, oh, tarot represents tar and ro, which means royal road. And the Egyptianists were like, we have no evidence that the word tarot was derived from Egyptian language. So, but it's interesting to see those connections, because we're going to go into the whole occult system where it has all those connections too in a different section. Maybe this section, depends. So, however, the identification of tarot cards with the Egyptian Book of Thoth has become firmly established. So, because of this guy, that's where we start going into the occult sections of actually everything. All right? So, that is kind of pretty cool. Like, this one guy changed the direction of tarot into the occult by making connections. And even if later on everyone was like, there's no proof of that connection, it's just random circumstance. It's pretty cool to see that he actually diverted tarot altogether. Alright? So, there was obviously a huge push for, like, tarot and everything else in these, like, royals' lives. Now, there's only one other person I want to point out into the 1790s, so this is again like another like 10 years. I want to point out the woman Marie Anne Lenormand. I can never pronounce that. I know it's deck, the lemon deck or Lemorand deck. I can never pronounce, so I'm just gonna call her Marie Anne. All right, because I am not good with that last name. I don't know why. My tongue does not like it. So that is a deck. And the deck was actually titled after her. So she did not create the deck. The deck was titled after her. So, why is she important during the 1790? Alright? It's because she was the first tarot reader that was female, really, during this time. Because you have to remember, females were like second-class citizens in this concept. Like, even the queen in the decks came later. So females were second-class citizens. Funny enough, most tarot readers nowadays are female, but females were second-class citizens. So this was kind of like a high-end kind of game thing that males did. It wasn't like, yes, queens could touch it. Yes, certain females in that, but it was more male-esque. So, Marie Anne was the first woman who actually was a reader. She lived in Paris. She was a Paris person. She said that she learned from the roaming gypsies. So, a pack of gypsies got their hands on these decks, learned how to read, and taught her, is what she said. That's what she claimed. She was also the reader for Napoleon's first wife, Josephine. So it's not that the big thing that got her name in it too was that she was reading for Napoleon's first wife. So she was reading for the royals. Alright, so she swore that she only learned from gypsies. She was the first female to really read, like, as a figure. And she was reading for Napoleon's first wife, Josephine. So not only was she, like, a female, she was reading for people who were important. The other thing that she did, which really helped gap the royals and the big people to the little people, she would also read for commoners. So when she wasn't reading for the high-ups, she was also reading for the commoners and things like that, which really helped gap who could get their hands on these cards, because it was a really big thing and it cost a lot of money to get your hands on these cards, because even with the printing press in action, that was like a wood press, like a stamping kind of wood press concept. it wasn't like the printers we see today. So it did still take time. Paper was expensive, the whole 9 yards, yada, yada, yada. So the fact that she was reading for commoners and letting commoners see the cards was huge. It helped bridge that gap. All right. So I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's really, really important. All right. So that is the very basics of the background of tarot, and then it starts moving into like the occult, the secret societies, and so on and so forth. And the people actually like connecting the dots. And I'm gonna do another video on that because I think these short little blibbits are easier to digest because this can be a lot. All right, so that is just like the early days of where these cards come from. All right, so thank you guys for watching. Best luck to you in all of your practices. If you want more videos, please like this. If you have questions about the dates and the concepts, because I know it's kind of like bloop, and then this happened, and then this happened, please comment with questions. And if you want to have the rest of this whole, because I'm going to teach you all about the cards and everything, follow along by subscribing or hitting that notification bell, all right? So I'm going to do a whole thing. I got pages of history. We're going to go into the Golden Dawn and everything else. So if you like this concept and you want to follow along and learn about the tarot, the history, how to do it, the card meanings, the whole 9 yards, follow along. And other than that, most importantly, go pick up a deck and do magic. Bye, guys.